Imagine going through a total bodily transformation, where your entire nervous system is rebuilt, yet you somehow still remember lessons you learned in your previous form. This isn't science fiction, it's the astonishing reality for butterflies after they emerge from their chrysalis.
It truly is one of the most perplexing and fascinating aspects of their biology. The idea that a creature can undergo such a complete cellular restructuring, essentially dissolving into a kind of biological soup, and still retain some thread of its past experience, challenges so many of our assumptions about memory and identity.
Perplexing is an understatement. We're talking about a creature that starts as a caterpillar, essentially an eating machine, then seals itself away and reforms almost entirely. What we've learned recently suggests that even after this dramatic reboot, a whisper of the old self makes it through. How do scientists even test for something like that?
Researchers have conducted carefully designed experiments. They've trained caterpillars to associate specific smells with an unpleasant experience, essentially teaching them to avoid those scents. Then, after these caterpillars undergo metamorphosis and emerge as adult butterflies, they're tested again. Astonishingly, these adult butterflies still show an aversion to the very same smells they were trained to avoid as caterpillars, even though their nervous system has been completely rebuilt.
So it's not just a reflex, it implies some form of memory, some learning that transcends the physical form. That's mind-boggling. It fundamentally shifts our understanding of what metamorphosis means beyond just a physical change.
Precisely. It suggests that while the body undergoes an almost complete overhaul, there's some persistent mechanism, perhaps at a deeper molecular or cellular level within those surviving imaginal discs we'll talk about later, that carries over certain learned behaviors or associations. It's not ordinary growth, and it's certainly not death. It's a controlled rebuilding of life from within, with echoes of the past.
That's an incredible hook into the world of butterflies. It makes you realize how much engineering, how much mystery is packed into these seemingly delicate creatures. But let's rewind a bit. Before they're even dissolving into a soup or remembering past lives, how does a butterfly even perceive the world? We tend to think of vision as dominant, but what about taste or touch?
That's an excellent place to start because their sensory world is profoundly different from ours. For instance, a question few of us ever consider is, what does a leaf taste like to a butterfly? It turns out butterflies literally taste with their feet.
With their feet? So, when you see a butterfly land gently on a leaf, it's not just resting.
Not at all. It's performing a crucial task. They have tiny sensors, chemoreceptors on their feet. So when a female butterfly lands, she's actually sampling the surface. She's using these delicate chemical detectors to assess whether the plant is the correct host for her eggs, whether it's fit for the next generation of caterpillars.
To us, a leaf is just green, maybe some variations in texture. But for a butterfly, it's a chemical signature, a complex code she's deciphering with every step.
Exactly. That single leaf carries traces of sugar, oil, toxins, and chemistry that tell her precisely what it is. A female might even drum gently with her feet, testing the surface repeatedly before she decides to entrust a single leaf with her precious eggs. The butterfly's world in many ways is built from touch and chemistry as much as it is from color and flight.
That's a level of discrimination we can barely imagine. And speaking of vision, they also see colors we can't, don't they? Ultraviolet light, for instance?
Absolutely. Many butterflies detect ultraviolet light, which is invisible to the human eye. This means that flowers that appear uniform to us might actually have intricate UV patterns, guiding the butterfly straight to its nectar. Even other butterflies can have UV markings that are part of their communication or courtship displays.
So a garden that looks calm and uniformly colored to us is, to a butterfly, a landscape layered with secret signs, like a hidden map telling them where to find food or mates.
Precisely. And their eyes themselves are nothing like ours. They possess compound eyes, built from thousands of tiny individual units, each sampling a slightly different angle. This stitches together a broad, motion-sensitive view of the world, perfectly tuned for a life spent dodging sudden dangers while in flight. It's less about sharp focus and more about detecting movement across a wide field.
That's a very practical adaptation. Now, you mentioned flight, and that brings me to something truly legendary about butterflies, Their migrations. We hear about monarchs, but the scale of these journeys for such tiny creatures seems almost unbelievable.
It truly is astounding. Picture something weighing less than a paperclip crossing an entire continent. Monarch butterflies, for instance, migrate farther than many birds do each autumn. They leave Canada and the northern United States, flying thousands of miles to reach mountain forests in central Mexico for the winter.
Thousands of miles on nothing but instinct, sunlight, and wind. But here's the part that always gets me. The butterflies that arrive in Mexico have never been there before. They're not led by their parents. They haven't made the journey themselves. How does that work?
This is where the concept of a living compass comes in. It's a route inherited from ancestors they will never meet. The journey is completed in relay across several generations. The butterflies that fly south for the winter are often the great-grandchildren of the ones that flew north in the spring. Each generation carries the genetic programming for the route a little farther.
So it's not a memorized map, it's a genetic blueprint. They're dodging storms, predators, and exhaustion, yet somehow they manage to gather in the very same wintering forests, coating the trees in trembling orange. It's as if the destination is encoded in their DNA.
That's a good way to put it. And their navigation is incredibly sophisticated. The monarch, for example, carries a built-in sun compass in its brain. Because the sun's position shifts throughout the day, the monarch's internal clock constantly recalculates its direction, correcting its course hour by hour.
So it's not reading landmarks the way we would, it's reading the sky itself. But what happens on a cloudy day or if they're blown off course?
That's another layer of their navigational brilliance. Even when blown off course by wind, they can often find their way back, and some researchers believe monarchs can sense Earth's magnetic field, an invisible thread stretching from pole to pole that we can't feel at all, but that may quietly steer a butterfly when the sky offers no other clues.
An invisible compass supplementing a sun compass, all within a creature that weighs less than a paperclip. It's a staggering achievement. And it's not just monarchs, is it? Other species have similar long-distance capabilities.
Indeed. Take the painted lady, for instance. This small orange and black butterfly can cross deserts, mountains, and entire seas, moving in some years from North Africa clear across Europe. And astonishingly, no single butterfly finishes that journey alone. It's also completed in relay across several generations, each one carrying the route a little farther before laying the next set of eggs.
And even the red admiral, which we see commonly in gardens, wanders almost as widely, turning up as if from nowhere. It's a testament to the fact that many of these migrations happen so high above our heads that we often don't even notice them. I've heard radar studies have revealed entire rivers of butterflies moving through the sky, using high winds like invisible highways.
That's right. They leverage atmospheric currents, turning a potential obstacle into a mode of transport. It really puts into perspective the scale of their journeys and the sophistication of their adaptations.
Speaking of adaptations, let's go back to the beginning of this incredible transformation. What actually happens inside that little green chrysalis? You mentioned a living soup. That sounds quite dramatic.
It is. The chrysalis isn't just a sleeping bag for a caterpillar. It's a living transformation chamber. A caterpillar doesn't simply grow wings and step into a new shape. Much of its body actually breaks down into a kind of nutrient-rich cellular soup. However, not everything dissolves.
So it's not complete obliteration. There are specific parts that survive?
Yes, hidden within the caterpillar's body are clusters of specialized cells called imaginal discs. These discs are essentially pre-formed packets of cells for the adult structures: wings, legs, antennae, eyes. While the rest of the caterpillar's body is being reorganized, these imaginal discs survive and begin building the adult form from scratch.
So the wings, the compound eyes, the intricate antennae, they're not just newly grown. They're assembled from cells that were quietly waiting the whole time inside the caterpillar. That's a staggering level of pre-programming.
It is. It's a process of controlled deconstruction and reconstruction. The stillness on the outside of the chrysalis is entirely deceiving. Inside, one life is quietly and violently becoming another. And what's more, the chrysalis itself is part of the caterpillar's own body, reorganizing itself from within.
And the silk that they use, I've heard it's quite remarkable.
Indeed, before any of this, a caterpillar is already an architect. Many use silk to fold and stitch leaves into shelters, protecting themselves from predators. And that same silk later anchors the chrysalis itself during one of the most vulnerable stages of its life. Some chrysalises even shine with a metallic, gold-like sheen, so convincing that people have mistaken them for treasure.
That explains the origin of the word then, doesn't it? Chrysalis comes from an ancient word for gold.
Exactly right. It's a beautiful linguistic connection to the inherent wonder of the transformation. And even in that stillness, a chrysalis isn't entirely helpless. Some can twitch or wriggle suddenly if disturbed, startling a predator or shaking off danger without ever being able to run.
A tiny defense mechanism for a creature in its most vulnerable state. It's incredible to think of a caterpillar before this transformation, too. You described it as an eating machine, but it's also a highly specialized mover.
Absolutely. Here's something that might change how you look at a caterpillar forever. It contains more individual muscles than the human body. With no internal skeleton at all, it moves in slow, rippling waves, front-reaching, middle contracting, rear gripping tight with tiny hook-like feet.
More muscles than a human, that's astonishing. So it's not just an unfinished butterfly. It's a highly specialized organism in its own right, built for a life spent entirely among stems and leaves.
That's the perfect description. It's optimized for feeding and growing rapidly, a continuous motion machine that converts plant matter into biomass. And their strategies for survival during this stage are equally diverse and ingenious. Some caterpillars produce sugary droplets that ants find irresistible.
So the ants act like bodyguards, protecting the caterpillar in exchange for this sweet treat.
Exactly. It's a fascinating symbiotic relationship. Some blue butterfly caterpillars take this even further, living inside ant nests themselves, using chemical mimicry to blend into the colony undetected. If the disguise fails, it can be fatal. But if it succeeds, the future butterfly grows up protected inside one of the most organized societies in the insect world.
That's an incredibly high-stakes gamble. And you mentioned they use vibrations too.
Yes, some go even further still, producing tiny vibrations that travel through leaves and soil like a secret language. Sometimes they even mimic the signals of an ant queen herself to win better treatment underground.
This isn't just a biological curiosity. It sounds like it has real-world implications for conservation.
It absolutely does. Take the large blue butterfly, which vanished from Britain entirely for years. Scientists initially assumed the cause was simple habitat loss. But the real answer was stranger. The caterpillar needed one specific species of ant to complete its life cycle. Once that relationship was restored, along with the right grassland conditions, the butterfly was successfully reintroduced from Sweden and returned to British hillsides.
That's an incredible story of ecological detective work. It really underscores how complex these ecosystems are and how precisely many butterflies depend on a single plant or species.
It does. A female may test leaf after leaf with taste and touch before finally laying her eggs, because her caterpillar may only be able to safely eat one specific plant species on Earth. Monarch caterpillars, for instance, feed exclusively on milkweed. They even store the plant's bitter toxins inside their own bodies, turning the milkweed's defense into their own and carrying that protection with them even after metamorphosis.
So the very thing that makes them unpalatable to predators as a caterpillar carries over to their adult form, making them less appealing to birds. It's a lifelong defense mechanism starting from their diet. Let's talk about their appearance for a moment. We think of wings as just beautiful, but they're incredibly complex.
They are. Look closely enough at a wing and it stops looking like fabric at all. Butterfly scales are modified hairs arranged like microscopic roof tiles, thousands of tiny overlapping plates that give butterflies their color, their shimmer, their waterproofing, and even their ability to regulate warmth.
That powdery dust that comes off on your fingers if you touch a wing, that's the scales themselves.
Precisely. Each one placed with astonishing precision during development. A wing is both a canvas and a machine. And the way some of them achieve color is just mind-blowing. The blue morpho's brilliant blue, for instance, doesn't come from pigment at all.
So it's not a dye. How does it work then?
It's what's called structural color. The blue comes from microscopic ridges on the scales that bend and scatter light itself. If you were to grind the wing to dust, the blue disappears completely because the color was never painted on. It was built like a tiny optical machine, thin enough to tear with a breath.
That's incredible. It's like a living prism. And other butterflies take this to the opposite extreme with transparency, like the glasswing butterfly.
Exactly. The glasswing butterfly's wings are almost entirely transparent, not through magic, but through microscopic surface structures that stop light from reflecting the way it would off plastic or glass. A bird searching through leaves may see nothing at all where a living creature is quietly resting.
It's a perfect disappearing act. And then there's camouflage, which also plays into their survival.
Camouflage in this world can be just as extreme as color. Some butterflies fold their wings shut and instantly resemble a dead leaf, complete with veins. Owl butterflies carry giant eye-like markings that can startle a predator into hesitating just long enough to escape. Some hair-streak butterflies even grow a false head on their hind wings, tricking predators into striking the wrong end entirely, sacrificing a piece of wing instead of their life.
That's brilliant. A built-in decoy. And caterpillars do this too, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. Some resemble bird droppings simply to avoid being noticed at all, while spicebush swallowtail caterpillars develop false eye spots that make them look, for one crucial moment, like a small snake. None of it is real danger, just borrowed fear worn like a costume.
It's all about tricking predators. And speaking of predators, some butterflies survive simply by pretending to be dangerous, even if they aren't.
This is mimicry, one of evolution's most elegant tricks. If a bird eats a toxic butterfly and gets sick, it learns to avoid that pattern for good. This means a harmless species wearing the same warning colors gets to share the protection for free. The viceroy butterfly was famously thought to be a simple copycat of the monarch, borrowing its warning colors.
But that story had a twist, didn't it?
It did. Scientists looked closer and found the viceroy may be unpleasant to predators in its own right, meaning both species may reinforce the very same warning together. It's a form of what's called Müllerian mimicry. Even the obvious stories in nature have hidden layers.
That's a powerful lesson about not taking things at face value in the natural world. Let's shift to how they fuel themselves. We know they drink nectar, but what about other sources?
Nectar provides sugar, which is essential energy, but it often doesn't provide all the necessary minerals, particularly sodium, that butterflies need to survive and reproduce. So they seek minerals anywhere they can find them: mud, sweat, dung, and yes, tears.
Tears? So certain tropical species will land near the eyes of turtles, birds, and even crocodiles to sip salty tears?
That's absolutely right. A crocodile resting in the sun, mouth still, eyes exposed, can become an accidental mineral spring for the smallest, boldest visitors in the forest. What looks like ordinary mud to us is, to them, a mineral well essential for nerve function, muscle activity, and reproduction. This phenomenon is called puddling.
A butterfly banquet of dissolved sodium, and I've heard there's an almost touching aspect to this behavior, particularly in males.
There is. In many species, males gather these minerals specifically as a gift. During mating, nutrients can pass from male to female along with sperm, helping her produce healthier eggs. So a butterfly at a puddle isn't just thirsty, it may be preparing a contribution to a generation that hasn't even hatched yet.
That's a significant investment. So it's not always about flowers and nectar. Some species have quite different preferences, don't they?
Indeed, not every butterfly wants your roses. Many species actually prefer rotting fruit and fermenting sap over fresh nectar, turning up in loud, colorful groups above a fallen mango or fig on a forest floor. It shows that beauty in the natural world is perfectly comfortable with decay.
It's a reminder that their needs are very different from our aesthetic preferences. And the history of these insects goes back further than many of us might assume, even before many of the flowers we associate them with.
Fossil evidence suggests early relatives of butterflies existed before flowering plants even dominated the earth. This means their ancestors were sipping from conifers and ancient seed plants long before a single daisy ever bloomed. It was only later that they entered their now famous partnership with flowers, becoming vital pollinators.
So, the coevolution of butterflies and flowering plants is a relatively newer chapter in their story. We've talked about how they navigate, how they transform, how they defend themselves, but what about their actual flight? It sometimes looks so erratic.
That's another ingenious adaptation. Flight itself is a kind of disguise. A butterfly's apparently clumsy, zigzagging path isn't chaos, it's a defense. Predators struggle to predict where an unpredictable target will be a second from now. What looks like carelessness may actually be one of the sharpest survival strategies in the sky.
So the unpredictable flutter is a calculated move to avoid being caught, and their wings, while delicate, are incredibly strong.
They solve an engineering puzzle few of us ever think about, staying light enough to fly, yet strong enough to survive wind, branches, and near misses. Delicate veins act as a scaffold, distributing strength exactly where it's needed. This is also why a butterfly can keep flying even with a torn or partially missing wing. Life doesn't need to be perfect to keep going. It only needs to still work.
That's a powerful metaphor for resilience. And they also need warmth to fly, don't they?
Yes, a butterfly's muscles won't even switch on properly until they're warm. That's why so many bask in open sunlight before becoming active, some angling their whole bodies sideways to catch the light more efficiently, turning the sun into part of their own engine. In cooler climates, darker wings can even act like tiny heat-collecting panels, absorbing more solar radiation.
They're incredibly efficient solar collectors. This makes me think about how they survive in extreme environments beyond the usual temperate gardens.
Some butterflies take this to the extreme. Alpine species survive near snow and ice, timing their entire lives to a narrow window between snowmelt and frost. Arctic butterflies may take multiple years just to finish growing up, pausing development through the long frozen months.
Multiple years for a single life cycle. That's an extraordinary delay.
And on the other end of the spectrum, desert species wait, sometimes for years, for a single burst of rain to trigger a short, explosive burst of life. Their entire existence is predicated on a fleeting moment of moisture.
It seems that survival is less about avoiding hardship and more about precisely adapting to it. I want to touch on their internal workings for a moment. They're built on entirely different rules than our bodies, aren't they?
Absolutely. Butterflies breathe through tiny openings along their sides called spiracles, not through lungs like us. Their blood, called hemolymph, carries no red oxygen-carrying pigment and can appear pale greenish or nearly clear. Their heart isn't a chambered organ at all, but a long pulsing tube running the length of the body. Some species can even hear through organs hidden on their wings.
So almost nothing about them works quite the way we'd expect based on our own anatomy. And their relationship to moths is also more complex than just day versus night.
They belong to a much larger family tree than most people realize. They share deep ancestry with moths, and the boundary between the two groups is far blurrier than dayflyer versus nightflyer suggests. Skippers, for example, blur that line even further with their own darting flight style and hooked antennae, possessing characteristics of both groups.
It's not as clear-cut as a textbook often makes it seem. What happens to them when night falls?
When night falls, many butterflies vanish into shelter, hanging beneath leaves or clinging to stems, sometimes gathering in clusters for warmth and safety. And in the mountains of central Mexico, millions of monarchs gather together for the winter in Oyamel fir forests, dense enough to bend branches, resting until sunlight warms them into a shifting cloud of orange.
A breathtaking sight, I imagine, and fascinating that the lifespan of a butterfly can vary so dramatically depending on the season or species.
Butterfly lifespans stretch and shrink depending entirely on the season. Some adults live only a few urgent days, just long enough to mate and lay eggs. Others survive for months by slowing their bodies down through a suspended state called diapause, waiting out winter as an egg, a caterpillar, a chrysalis, or even a fully grown adult tucked into a tree hollow.
It's all about timing their life stages to the most favorable conditions, but with changing climates, that timing must be thrown off, making them vulnerable.
Climate change is quietly reshaping where many of these species can even survive, pushing some further uphill or toward the poles while leaving others stranded when their timing no longer matches their host plants. Because butterflies respond so quickly to environmental shifts, they can act almost like a warning light for the health of an entire ecosystem.
They're a sensitive barometer for environmental health, and this is where citizen science plays a role.
Precisely. Thousands of ordinary citizen scientists now help track these shifts across whole countries, turning small backyard sightings into a genuinely national picture of ecological change. If any of this has ever made you want to help, even a small native plant garden can work as a stepping stone for butterflies moving through a neighborhood, sometimes mattering more than the showiest flowers ever could.
That's an inspiring thought, that even small actions can make a difference. It seems humans have long been captivated by butterflies. Their names alone are steeped in imagination. Monarch, queen, emperor, painted lady. They sound like they escaped from mythology.
They do, and it's not just poetic fascination. Vladimir Nabokov, best known as a novelist, was also a serious butterfly scientist whose ideas about certain blue butterflies were later supported by genetic research. Darwin and Wallace both studied butterfly variation directly on their way toward the theory of evolution, watching islands shape entirely new patterns of color and form in real time.
So their intricate biology has been a cornerstone for scientific understanding for centuries, and still is today with genetics.
Even today, heliconius butterflies are helping scientists trace specific genes responsible for wing pattern and mimicry. It's proof that a butterfly's wing can be read almost like a genetic map, carrying fragments of ancient interbreeding between species that still shape the colors we see today.
From a tiny egg, to a hungry caterpillar, to a hidden chrysalis, to wings bright enough to catch the sun, it's a journey filled with so many counterintuitive wonders. We've seen them taste with their feet, red light we'll never see, and navigate by a compass built into their very bodies.
And remember lessons after their entire nervous system has been rebuilt. They are truly nature's most dramatic act of reinvention, yet with an uncanny thread of continuity.
This comprehensive overview of butterfly biology has been truly enlightening, Finn. It certainly makes you look at every flutter in the garden with newfound respect. If you found this conversation as captivating as we did, please consider sharing it with someone who might also appreciate the hidden wonders of the natural world.